What are you doing here? I'm sorry, what do you mean?
You're loitering on bank property.
Officer, I'm standing on a public sidewalk.
Officer,
Don't argue with me. I need to see your ID. Now.
the officer had no idea that the man he was about to humiliate had spent the last decade documenting exactly this kind of abuse. He didn't know that every word he spoke was being captured not just by his own body cam, but by the very phone he was demanding Marcus put down. And he certainly didn't know that this encounter on this ordinary Tuesday afternoon would cost him his career and the city $300,000. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in downtown Charlotte. The sidewalk outside the Chase Bank branch was busy professionals grabbing late lunches, students with backpacks, a street musician a block away. Marcus Hayes, 38 years old, stood near the corner, casually dressed in jeans and a hoodie, scrolling through notes on his phone. He was early for a meeting with the source, a former officer willing to talk about department culture. So he waited, reviewing his questions, occasionally glancing up at the foot traffic. Officer Derek Pullman had been patrolling this district for 6 years. He knew the rhythms of the street, the regulars, the businesses. When he spotted Marcus, a black man standing still, focused on his phone, something triggered his suspicion. He radioed dispatch. Possible suspicious person near Chase Bank on Tryon, checking it out. He pulled his patrol car to the curb and stepped out, already watching Marcus with narrowed eyes. To Pullman, a man loitering near a bank meant one thing: casing the location. Never mind that Marcus was on a public sidewalk. Never mind that hundreds of people pass this spot every hour. In Pullman's mind, Marcus didn't belong. "I need to see your ID," Pullman repeated, now standing directly in front of Marcus. Marcus pocketed his phone and met the officer's eyes. "Am I being detained? What's the reasonable suspicion?" Pullman's jaw tightened. He hated when people talked like lawyers. "Don't get smart with me. I'm investigating suspicious activity." "What suspicious activity?" Marcus kept his voice calm, even. "I'm standing on a public sidewalk, loitering," Pullman shot back. "Now show me your ID or I'll arrest you for obstruction." Marcus didn't move. "Officer, I've been here for maybe 3 minutes. I'm waiting for someone." "That's not loitering. That's loitering in my book." Pullman stepped closer. "Last chance. ID." Marcus took a slow breath. "In North Carolina, I'm not required to identify myself unless you have reasonable, articulable suspicion that I've committed a crime." "What crime do you suspect me of?" This was Officer Pullman's first mistake. On a public sidewalk with no articulable crime, he had no legal right to demand identification. Marcus was correct. North Carolina is not a stop and identify state. Without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity, a person has no obligation to provide ID. But Pullman didn't care about the law in that moment. He cared about control. Have you ever been stopped for simply existing in public? For standing, waiting, breathing while the wrong color in the wrong neighborhood? Drop your story in the comments. And if you want to see how this officer's day gets exponentially worse, hit that subscribe button, because this case goes all the way to federal court. Marcus slowly pulled his phone back out and held it up, screen facing the officer. The red recording dot was visible. "I'm recording this interaction. I have a First Amendment right to do so." Pullman's face flushed. "Put that phone down. Now." "Officer, I'm exercising my constitutional right to record police activity in a public space." "That phone is evidence." Pullman reached toward it. "Hand it over." Marcus pulled the phone back, keeping it at chest level, camera still pointed at the officer. "You have no legal basis to seize my property. You're interfering with my investigation. I'm standing still and recording. That's not interference." In every U.S. jurisdiction, citizens have the clearly established right to film police officers performing their duties in public spaces. This right has been affirmed in multiple federal circuit court decisions: Glick v. Cuniff in the First Circuit, Turner v. Driver in the Fifth, Fields v. City of Philadelphia in the Third. The law is not ambiguous. Recording police is protected speech under the First Amendment, and officers who retaliate against citizens for recording violate clearly established constitutional rights. Officer Pullman wasn't just wrong. He was violating settled law. And that distinction, clearly established law, would matter enormously for what came next. Pullman grabbed for the phone. Marcus instinctively pulled back, protecting his property. That's all it took. "That's resisting," Pullman shouted. You're under arrest. Everything happened fast. Pullman spun Marcus around and slammed him against the bank's brick exterior. Marcus's phone clattered to the ground. Metal handcuffs bit into his wrists, tightened aggressively. "This is an unlawful arrest," Marcus said, voice strained but controlled. "I am not resisting. You pulled away from me. That's assault on an officer." Pullman wrenched Marcus's arms higher, forcing him onto his toes. A small crowd had gathered. 2 people were recording on their phones. A woman in business attire stopped mid-stride, hand over her mouth. "Back up," Pullman barked at the onlookers. "This is police business. Put those phones away." Nobody moved. The cameras kept recording. Pullman dragged Marcus toward the patrol car and shoved him into the back seat. Then he returned to retrieve Marcus's phone from the sidewalk. He tried to unlock it. Face ID failed. Frustrated, he dropped it into an evidence bag. A backup officer arrived, stepping out of his vehicle with a questioning look. Officer Chen had worked with Pullman before. He surveyed the scene. The handcuffed man in the car, the crowd of witnesses, the phone still recording. "What have we got?" Chen asked quietly. "Obstruction and resisting," Pullman said, breathing hard, adrenaline still pumping. Chen glanced at the patrol car, then back at Pullman. "Did you run him? What was the initial stop for?" "Loitering. Suspicious behavior near a bank." Chen said nothing. He just looked at Pullman for a long moment, then at a young man holding up his phone, recording everything. Chen's expression was unreadable, but his silence spoke volumes. Officer Pullman had just committed multiple constitutional violations. Unlawful detention stopping Marcus without reasonable suspicion. Unlawful arrest seizing him without probable cause. First Amendment retaliation arresting him in response to protected speech. Illegal seizure of property taking his phone without a warrant or exigent circumstances. And he still had no idea who was sitting in the back of his patrol car. At the station, the booking process began routinely. Pullman filled out the arrest report, charging Marcus with resisting public officer and obstruction. At the desk, Sergeant Morrison ran Marcus's name through the system for warrants and priors. Morrison's face changed. He leaned closer to his screen, scrolling. Then he looked up at Pullman. "Did you Google this guy before you arrested him?" Pullman frowned. "Why would I?" Morrison turned his monitor around. The screen showed a professional headshot, Marcus Hayes, smiling in a suit. Beneath it, a bio. Award-winning investigative journalist specializing in civil rights and police accountability. Contributing writer for The Marshall Project. Documentary producer. Emmy Award recipient for Blue Wall. Inside police misconduct. Pullman's mouth went dry. Morrison kept scrolling. "He's testified before Congress on qualified immunity reform. He's consulted on Department of Justice pattern and practice investigations. He literally wrote the book on First Amendment rights during police encounters." Morrison looked up. "He was probably doing a story, and you just became it." Pullman's voice came out weak. He didn't identify himself as press. He didn't have to. Morrison cut him off. He wasn't breaking any laws. You stopped him for standing on a sidewalk. The walls of the booking area seemed to close in. Pullman replayed the encounter in his mind, Marcus's calm questions, the precise legal language, the way he'd asserted his rights without hesitation. Of course he knew the law. "Get him processed and released," Morrison said. "Now, if you think this reveal was satisfying, wait until you hear what happens in federal court. Hit subscribe so you don't miss how this plays out, because this is where it gets expensive." Pullman stood frozen in the booking area, his arrest report still in hand. The implications crashed over him like a wave. The witnesses, the recordings, the journalist who specialized in exactly this kind of case. From the holding cell, Marcus spoke, his voice carrying that same measured calm. "Officer, I'd like to make my phone call now." Pullman didn't respond. He just stared at nothing, his mind racing through everything he'd said, everything he'd done. Morrison stepped between them. "Pullman, process his release." The walk to the holding cell felt like miles. Pullman unlocked the door, avoiding eye contact. When he removed the handcuffs, he saw the deep red marks on Marcus's wrists, where the metal had dug into skin. Marcus rubbed them slowly, deliberately. At the property desk, Pullman returned the evidence bag containing Marcus's phone. Marcus checked the screen, still recording. 47 minutes of footage. Pullman cleared his throat. "Look, I was just..." Marcus's eyes were ice. "Save it for the deposition. He walked out of the station into the late afternoon sun. Pullman stood in the hallway, watching him go, and knew with absolute certainty that his career was over. Within 24 hours, Marcus filed a formal complaint with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. It wasn't a simple narrative. It was a legal document, time-stamped, cross-referenced, supported by video evidence from multiple angles. He requested all body cam footage, CAD records, and radio transmissions from the incident. He attached witness statements collected on scene. He included screenshots from his own phone showing the timestamp and GPS coordinates. The department's public affairs office issued a statement: "We take all complaints seriously and are reviewing the incident thoroughly. We cannot comment on ongoing investigations." But Marcus wasn't stopping there. His attorney, David Friedman from the North Carolina Justice Center, a civil rights firm with a reputation for winning, sent a preservation notice to the city within 48 hours. The notice demanded preservation of all evidence: body cam footage, in-car camera footage, officer personnel files, training records, disciplinary history, department policies on stops and searches, and all communications related to the incident. Officer Pullman was placed on administrative duty pending internal review, no street patrol, desk work only. But here's where Marcus did something most people can't. He didn't just complain. He published. 1 week after his arrest, his article dropped on the Marshall Project's website, "I was arrested for journalism, a first-person account of constitutional violations in broad daylight." The piece was devastating. Marcus embedded the body cam footage obtained through an expedited public records request. He broke down each constitutional violation step by step, citing case law, explaining qualified immunity, and contextualizing his experience within the broader pattern of police retaliation against those who record. The article went viral. 500,000 shares in the first 48 hours. Local news picked it up, then regional outlets, then national. CNN ran a segment. NPR interviewed Marcus on Morning Edition. The American Civil Liberties Union amplified it across their platforms. Suddenly, a routine arrest became a national conversation. The internal affairs investigation began as a formality. It ended as an excavation. Investigators pulled Officer Pullman's complete service record. What they found was a pattern the department had spent 6 years ignoring. 7 prior complaints. 4 involved allegations of racial profiling stops that followed the exact same script as Marcus's encounter. 2 involved First Amendment issues, citizens recording traffic stops who were told to put the phone away or be arrested. 1 excessive force allegation from 3 years prior, settled quietly by the city's legal department for an undisclosed sum. None of these complaints had resulted in meaningful discipline. Pullman had received verbal counseling twice. He'd attended a half-day community relations training, but he'd never been suspended, never been formally reprimanded, never faced real consequences. This wasn't just one bad interaction. It was a pattern the department had enabled through indifference. Marcus's legal team went deeper. During discovery, they found 3 other civilians arrested by Pullman under strikingly similar circumstances. All 3 were people of color. All 3 were exercising constitutional rights. All 3 were charged with obstruction or resisting charges that were later dropped by prosecutors who saw no probable cause. One case stood out: a college student recording a traffic stop on his way home from campus. Pullman had ordered him to stop recording. When the student refused, Pullman seized his phone and arrested him for interfering with official duties. The charges were dismissed. The student never pursued legal action. He couldn't afford a lawyer. Another, a man questioned outside his own apartment building, accused of trespassing on property where he lived. When he asked why he was being stopped, Pullman arrested him. Again, charges dropped. No apology issued. The pattern was undeniable. But what made Marcus's case different, what made it worth $300,000, was that the department's failure to supervise, train, or discipline Officer Pullman demonstrated deliberate indifference. That's the legal standard for municipal liability. When a city knows about a pattern of constitutional violations and does nothing, the city itself becomes liable. Officer Pullman was placed on unpaid leave as the investigation expanded beyond internal affairs. The police union initially issued a statement defending him, calling for due process and warning against rush to judgment. But then the body cam footage was released to the media. The union went silent. Even they couldn't defend what was on that video. Internal Affairs sustained every allegation: unlawful detention, unlawful arrest, First Amendment retaliation, discourtesy, and conduct unbecoming. The investigative report was damning. It recommended termination. Police Chief Angela Ramirez agreed. In a brief press conference, she announced that Officer Derek Pullman had been terminated, effective immediately. "We hold our officers to the highest standards," Chief Ramirez said. "When those standards are violated, there are consequences." Marcus filed a Section 1983 civil rights lawsuit in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of North Carolina. The complaint named 3 defendants: Officer Derek Pullman in his individual capacity, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, and the City of Charlotte. The claims were specific: Fourth Amendment violation, unlawful seizure of person and property, First Amendment retaliation, arrest in response to protected speech, municipal liability, failure to train, supervise, and discipline. Marcus sought compensatory damages for the harm he suffered, punitive damages to deter future misconduct, and injunctive relief requiring policy reforms. Pullman's attorney moved to dismiss the case, arguing qualified immunity. The defense claimed that while Pullman may have made mistakes, the constitutional rights at issue weren't clearly established at the time of the incident. It was a standard defense tactic forced the plaintiff to prove not just that their rights were violated, but that every reasonable officer would have known the conduct was unlawful. Federal Judge Patricia Hammond reviewed the motion. Her ruling was swift and decisive. In a written opinion, Judge Hammond wrote, "The right to record police officers performing their duties in public has been clearly established in this circuit for over a decade. Similarly, the requirement of reasonable suspicion for a lawful Terry stop is foundational Fourth Amendment law. No reasonable officer could believe that arresting an individual for standing on a public sidewalk and recording police activity was lawful conduct. The defendant's motion for qualified immunity is denied." The case would proceed to discovery. Pullman's personal assets were now at risk. During depositions, the city's liability became impossible to deny. Pullman's disciplinary history, the prior complaints, the department's inadequate training on First Amendment rights, it all pointed to deliberate indifference. The city attorney advised settlement. Going to trial meant exposing the department's failures in open court. It meant a jury deciding damages. And Charlotte juries, in recent years, had not been kind to police departments in civil rights cases. But Marcus rejected the initial offers. This wasn't just about money. It was about accountability. He wanted admissions. He wanted reforms. He wanted to ensure this didn't happen to the next person who didn't have his resources or platform. The settlement was finalized: $300,000. The breakdown: $200,000 paid by the city, $100,000 paid by Officer Pullman personally from his assets and future earnings. Pullman's law enforcement certification was revoked by the State Criminal Justice Standards Commission. He would never work as a police officer again, not in North Carolina, not anywhere that ran a background check. But Marcus negotiated more than money. The settlement agreement included consent decrees requiring the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department to implement specific reforms. Asterisk, mandatory training on First Amendment rights, including the right to record police. Asterisk, updated department policy explicitly protecting citizen recordings. Asterisk, implementation of an early intervention system to flag officers with patterns of complaints. Asterisk, quarterly, public reporting on use of force and complaint data. Marcus donated $75,000 of his settlement to the North Carolina Legal Defense Fund, a nonprofit providing free legal representation to low-income individuals arrested while exercising their rights. Marcus Hayes didn't need to be a journalist for this arrest to be wrong. The Constitution protects all of us, not just those who know the law, not just those with platforms and legal teams. Every person standing on that sidewalk had the same rights Marcus asserted. But his case revealed something deeper: how officers who violate rights are often protected by departments that ignore warning signs. 7 complaints, multiple constitutional violations, and nothing happened until someone with resources and visibility forced accountability. The $300,000 settlement came from taxpayer funds. The community paid for Officer Pullman's actions and the department's failures. Some argue that's unjust, that taxpayers shouldn't bear the cost of individual misconduct. Others say it's the only way to force systemic change, that cities only reform when the financial pain becomes unbearable. What's undeniable is this. Without witnesses recording, without Marcus's knowledge and resources, this might have ended very differently. The charges might have stuck. Pullman might still be on patrol, and the next person stopped on that sidewalk might not walk away. So ask yourself, would Officer Pullman have acted the same way if Marcus had been white and wearing a business suit? Would the department have fired him if the story hadn't gone viral? And how many others were arrested under similar circumstances but didn't have the platform to fight back? This case proves that documentation changes everything. Marcus's phone recording and the witnesses' videos were the difference between accountability and another complaint buried in a file cabinet. If this story made you think differently about your rights, share it. If you've experienced something similar, you're not alone. Drop your story in the comments below. And if you want to see more breakdowns of cases where justice actually happened, subscribe and hit the bell, because these stories matter. The more people who understand their rights, the harder it becomes for officers like Derek Pullman to get away with this. Know your rights, use your camera, and never stop demanding accountability. Until next time.